Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, but there's no actual coffee. Each episode, we interviewed an expert in the field of law enforcement analysis to share their career-defining stories and to get their insights on the world. Please join us on recognizing and learning from these brilliant minds as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 16 years of law enforcement analysis experience. She's been an intel analyst, a crime analyst, and a computer forensics examiner. To avoid any doubt, she has 3 analytical certifications with the IACA, IACA, and the California Department of Justice. She's one of Minnesota's mightiest. Please welcome Angela Backer-Hines. Angela, how we doing?
I'm surviving. How are you?
I am surviving as well. I am doing great. So it's not already getting cold up there in Minnesota, is it?
Oh, no. It's quite muggy and hot today, actually. So I'm enjoying my air-conditioned office.
Oh, boy. What do you got, about another month?
Probably. It depends. Sometimes we get summer into October and straight into winter. So we'll see how it goes this year.
Very good. So I'm good. Let's go back in time first thing, because you started your career with a task force, a gang and drug task force.
I did.
And so I wanted to start there because you started out as an intern and then got hired on. And so I want to get into that a little bit for the audience to see if, is a task force a good place for somebody to come in and learn the position?
Well, I think it kind of depends on what position you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a really good learning experience. Like you said, I started out as an intern with our Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I was assigned to the task force through there. Once my internship was up, I was lucky enough to stay on as a student worker. And then when I graduated from college and the lead intel analyst in our unit moved on to the Federal Department of Justice, the commander asked me to stay. And I was like, yeah. So like, I would love to stay. So I kind of fell into it. I like to tell people, I didn't know I wanted to be an analyst. I had no clue what one was. They didn't teach me about it in school. So when I worked with one, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I'd love to stay here. You you hit the ground running in a task force, and, it's not your typical police department, as I'm sure you've worked at a task force.
Yes.
So it's like we didn't really have a records management system. I'm not necessarily analyzing crime. I'm more of an intel analyst. Our position was called criminal intelligence analyst. And so doing a lot of case support, a lot of connecting the dealers and gang members and tracking, who they're with and what cars they're driving and where they're hanging out and what kind of crimes they're committing today, and running all that for the investigators to build their cases. And so I learned a lot really quickly and made a lot of contacts, which I think is imperative for especially new analysts to, be able to reach out and do that. I think a task force is a wonderful place to do that. When you have so many people from different departments working at your task force, you have all those contacts naturally now with all those departments when you leave. So it was super helpful in that regard.
So was it just local jurisdictions in the task force, or did you get into the state and federal level as well?
This task force was statewide. I was stationed in the metro office, but we did have satellite offices that worked with the task forces. It was grant funded. So there were satellite offices that all were working similar cases and everything like that. And so I got in touch with a lot of people outstate as well, and would eventually go out and do training and things like that for them about this is how you document your intel files and things like that. So it was a really good experience for making those contacts.
What was your biggest challenge, do you think?
I think the biggest challenge was, coming in, not having any experience outside of the internship. We didn't have a crime analysis program in Minnesota. Technically, we still don't have a degree in crime analysis in Minnesota. There's one certificate program that started a few years ago. So I'm in there blind, I don't know what I'm doing. Just show me what to do. And I did have to have some stumbles when I first took over, when the main analyst left and I took her place, trying to be okay, what did she do every day that I didn't do? And how do I get on top of this? But it worked out really well. So
now, were you the only analyst there for the task force?
In the beginning, they had just the single analyst. Like I said, that I took her spot. And then later on, when they kind of started merging more of the gang and drug task forces together and having more support staff, there was one other analyst with me that they hired, and a National Guard counter drug analyst also came in. So by the time I left, there were 3 of us.
I always see intelligence analysis as research. And what I mean by research is it seems like you have a particular topic or a particular target that you're going after, and you're just trying to research and find as much information about that topic or target as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of times, especially in the U.S., intelligence analysis is definitely more person-focused or like criminal group focused rather than incident focused. So we did do a lot of digging and a lot of documenting to build those cases for them about like, what do we think they're going to be doing next that we can do something about.
And then you eventually move on to Burnsville PD. What kind of interesting stuff did you do for them?
Excuse me. Well, I was there for just a little over 2 years, and it was kind of a night and day experience because I'm going from a task force where I'm really just concentrating on the intelligence analysis and going to a local police department where I'm responsible for my one little jurisdiction. And now I have to do crime analysis, which I had never done before because there was no crime analysis to do at the task force. So, I'm thrown into this police department where it's just like, I should know how to do all these things and I don't. So it was kind of a crash course, and I have a whole different set of expectations now. But, you get your feet under you and you do what you can. And I was lucky enough when I was at the task force to be sent to the Alpha Group's trainings that had come through Minnesota. So I took my Steve Gottlieb book and just crammed through it again and again at Burnsville and just started incorporating it as much as I could. I'm like, I can do this.
But you're still dealing with a lot of intelligence there at the police department still, right? It's not just crime analysis.
Right. Yep. I did intelligence analysis at Burnsville, and I still do at Eagan as well. Burnsville was actually a little bit more focused on intel than crime analysis, at least when I began, but it's kind of reversed now at my current job where they want me to concentrate more on the crime analysis than the intel side, although they still want that. But every department, especially when there's only one analyst in the department, kind of has a different set of expectations about what they want their person to do every day. So you just kind of have to feel it out and hope that you can get everything done that they need.
So yeah, you're getting into ArcGIS and PenLink and I2. You're dealing with all these different programs. So you're getting experience with a wide variety of analytical tools.
Yep. We had a lot of tools at our disposal at the task force, and then I had some with me at Burnsville. But actually, ever since that I left there, the only extra software tool I've ever had is ArcGIS. So I've been trying to get I2, but budget,
Yeah, it's expensive.
It is expensive. It's a great tool, but it's expensive.
Yes. So then Burnsville, though, kind of ends badly for you, right?
Yeah, it ended poorly for me. The economic crisis hit in 2009, and the police department was forced to eliminate 4 positions, and unfortunately mine was one of them. So I was laid off. And I was devastated because it was like, oh, I'm going to stay here forever. This is the best job. I love my job. I love my coworkers. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're going to be done in May. And I'm like, what? What do I do now?
So was it a super shock? Did you have no idea that there were going to be any layoffs? Or
no, I had no idea. It never even occurred to me that would happen. And it's been at the forefront every time, I've only switched jobs twice since then, but it's been at the forefront every time I switch a job is this going to be permanent? Do you see this position as being something that is going to be a permanent part of your department? Because if they are just testing the waters, then I'm not going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how long did they give you when let you know? You
For
said
notice?
May. Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah.
They gave me about a month's notice, and I started racking my brain. And unfortunately, because the economics hit at the time and then every other department stopped hiring. And it was a really, unfortunate time in Minnesota to be an analyst because we actually lost more positions than we gained in probably about a 5 or 6 year period. So it was really stagnant around here. I called in my old department at Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, who I worked through when I was at the task force, and asked them, I was like, is there anything that you can do for me? And they're like, well, we can temporarily put you up at the Fusion Center for a little while until you find something else. And so I ended up luckily going to the Fusion Center for 3 months and then just taking the first full-time police department job that jumped out at me at Robbinsdale. I was like, it's full-time, it's in the metro, it's close by, done. So
yes. No, that's great. What kind of things did you get into at the Fusion Center?
Well, we did a lot of the all threats analysis and put out a weekly law enforcement brief to our law enforcement partners in the state. And then every other week we'd have meetings with the ATF and Homeland Security and the FBI just to share the information that they could. I obviously wasn't there long enough to get my secret security clearance. It just started when I left. So I had to be kicked out of some of those meetings, but
that's a bummer.
It's a bummer. But we would take all the suspicious activity reports and then whatever requests departments needed of the Fusion Center. If they don't have an analyst and needed assistance, then we would help them there. But I just started to get the lay of the land, as you would say, and then I left. So
But then once you get to Robbinsdale, that's when we get into your badge story, right?
Oh, yep.
All right. So tell me your badge story.
My badge story. Well, by the time I had come into Robbinsdale, I had been an analyst for, would it be almost about 5 years, but mostly, like I said, more intel focused than crime analysis focused. And my job at Robbinsdale, like probably many people who will maybe listen to the podcast, wasn't technically crime analysis related at all, but it was part of my tasks that I incorporated when I got there. So when I was hired, I asked my chief, I was just like, well, I'm an analyst. This is what I want to be doing. Can I still do this work while I'm here? And, he was like, yeah, when you have spare time or if something big is going on, put your analyst hat on, go ahead and do it. But, do your regular duties first, of course. So obviously I did. And, I had to supervise the records unit and I was doing all the accounting and the hiring for their police officers and everything like that. So I tried to expedite that as much as possible so I could get back to my first love of it, which is analysis. So I started putting out, the administrative bulletins and putting the stats together and things like that just to show him trends and try to do some forecasting and things like that. And then about a year in, my chief decided, okay, I like this. I'm going to support this a little more. He sent me to the tactical analysis training from IACA that they were hosting at a city nearby us. I go to this class. It's fantastic. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to incorporate this in my work. Well, yeah, it takes a little while for us to get a series that pops up, but one does. So for over about a 3-month period, we had 11 incidents of burglary and theft from garages in our little city. And for most people who don't know, obviously, Minnesota very well, but Robbinsdale is a very small town. It's a first-ring suburb, but the whole eastern border is Minneapolis, and it's only 2.5 square miles. So it's a really small little area. And for us to have 11 burglaries in 3 months, that's a really big deal. I decided, what the heck, I'm going to give this geographic profiling thing a try. The only tool I really have at my disposal besides, Microsoft Office tools is I had asked our streets department for a copy of their GIS and they gave me one. So I mapped out the incidents. I printed out on my piece of paper. I overlay a grid on it and I'm like, okay, let me put out all my numbers and get my XY coordinates and calculate my geographic profile. So I'm sure, you've probably done this before, but for those that don't know, with the geographic profile, with your series, you can potentially predict where your offender lives and the next incident location. I put all my stuff out. I got my little pencil and my calculator, and I'm getting my mean for all of my points on my map. And I calculate out the standard deviations so I can get my squares to where the next incidents will occur on my map. And I've got it all drawn out in different colors and stuff, and I'm making it kind of pretty. I get my location and I get my area, my rudimentary tools, and I put a little note on it and I hand it to the detective. And I'm like, okay, well, it's probably going to be Saturday night somewhere in this area. He probably lives around here. You guys do with it what you will. Because I've not done a prediction like this before, so I'm not sure how to present it to him. I'm like, here you go. And he's looking at it like, what is this map?
How big was your area that you were predicting that the burglar would strike?
Well, because of the size of the town, it covered a good chunk of the middle of the town. But given that he was hitting residential areas, that center area, part of it was a park and a lake, and part of it was businesses along one of the main roads. So the actual residential areas that he would have hit would have probably been like maybe a collectively 10 block, 11 block area.
Okay.
So it wasn't huge. As luck would have it, he did hit that weekend in my area, and they caught him because he actually passed out on the sofa inside the house, and the homeowners found him because he happened to be an alcoholic and a drug addict, and he was just, picking up stuff to sell for his next fix. So they did find him. It was like right smack dab in the middle of well, not in the middle, but in my area that I predicted. And he actually lived about 4 houses down from the place that I said his house would be. So,
wow.
And I'm sitting here in my office, like when I'm seeing this, I'm like, yes, I did it. It worked. That is so awesome. And then they did charge him with 8 of them. He did go away for a little while, but you know how they don't go away very long for property crime anyway. But when I left Robbinsdale, and this is like 3.5, 4 years later, that same detective got up and told this story when I was leaving about like, she did this, she found where the guy was and where he lived, and I will never forget how that worked. I was like, that is awesome. It just made me smile.
What was the class that you took that
it was
taught you this?
The tactical analysis class from IACA.
All right. And
so thank goodness he let me go to that, and that was awesome.
No, that's such a great feeling when you can predict exactly where the next hit's going to be, so to speak.
Yeah, I've had very few successes that well since then. I've had some, but not quite as close and good. So you look at it, it's like, God, it's 4 houses away. How awesome is that?
It's interesting because I did have Steve Gottlieb on about a month ago on the podcast, and we got to talking about what if the prediction area is in a lake. And he's like, well, obviously you're not going to go in the lake if the crime's not part of the lake.
Yep.
Right? So you just, you use that knowledge. That tells you where not to go, at least.
That tells you where not to go.
It actually shrinks your search area.
Yeah. Or you go and you look and you see it's like, hey, is every house they're hitting like within a block of the lake? And maybe that's your territory. You just kind of have to look where the details take you rather than just the math. But the math is super helpful to get you there first.
Now, you said Saturday night. What was the time span?
Oh, it was 11 o'clock to 3 a.m. They found him, I think, crashed out on their sofa probably around 2:30 when they called, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, it's like, okay, well, handy that he decided to fall asleep that day.
Yes. Now, were they home or did they come home?
No, they were home and they had heard, they heard something apparently that brought them down there. I just shake my head. I'm like, hey, well, if you're tired.
That's scary though. Someone's coming in.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't violent by any means. Yeah. So thank goodness. But yeah.
Do you remember if he said how he was targeting his houses?
No, I don't. And I don't even think that they asked.
Okay.
I should have had them ask.
Okay. No, that's okay. All right. Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your different certifications and talk a little bit more about intel analysis versus crime analysis. You're listening to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, it's Mindy from Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. Jason and I are happy to announce a new limited podcast series called Sean Bear's Guide to Hiring a Law Enforcement Analyst. In this series, Jason and Sean talk about different steps of the hiring process from both the standpoint of the hiring manager and the job seeker. As someone who recently got a new job during the production of the series, this really resonated with me. I learned a lot from this guide and it validated a lot of little practices I normally do, like bringing a portfolio or sending a thank you letter after the interview. Little things I thought didn't make that much of a difference but could really give you an advantage over the competition. I think this guide provides great insights into the hiring world, and Sean is so passionate about making sure that both parties are happy and benefit from the results. Obviously, this series was designed with hiring a quality analyst in mind, but I think the lessons can be utilized for other professions as well. Don't forget to check out our other projects on our website at www.leapodcast.com. Thanks!
Welcome back. Before the break, Angela was telling us her badge story about perfectly predicting when the burglar would strike next in a small community in Minnesota. Actually, we didn't talk about that. Am I saying Minnesota correctly, or is it Minnesota?
No, you were right the first time. That inflection is a northern Minnesota thing.
So I do want to talk a little bit about crime analysis and intelligence analysis. Talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but it's come up on the show a couple of different times. It's interesting. I had Christopher Bruce on last week.
Oh, yeah?
And
I love him. He's great.
way back when, he and I think it's where we met. He and I were part of a project with the Police Foundation. Jerry Radcliffe was putting together as part of a COPS project. This was back in 2007, I think 2008. In which we got into a group, and I think there was about 20 of us, and talked about crime analysis and intelligence analysis and the idea of integrating the two. Because in the States, it's very different. Everywhere else in the world, it's one and the same. I guess, where's your stance?
I do agree that in the U.S., it seems like in practice, people have them as two distinct professions, like disciplines. But, in my mind, the process for both is exactly the same. Like, you take the same steps. If you look at the analysis cycle that IACA puts together and the intelligence cycle that IALEA throws out, they're exactly the same. While I think the focus in each one is slightly different, like I said earlier, like intelligence is focusing more on the people and crime analysis is focusing more on your incident data, the application is very much the same. I believe that you should know how to do both and be able to do both to be a well-rounded analyst, especially if you're the only analyst at a department.
Well, I think that crime analysis and intelligence analysis are fundamentally the same. If you look at the crime analysis process that IACA promotes and then the intelligence process that IALEA promotes, they mirror one another. The steps are the same. Often we're conducting them simultaneously, and we should. In the U.S., it seems, as we've mentioned, that we've gotten into the habit of defining them as two distinct professions, where you're either doing one or the other, as opposed to other places in the world. I think that intelligence in the U.S. is typically something that's kind of conducted at a higher level agency. So say your county sheriff's offices, your state level law enforcement offices, or at the federal level, rather than at your local jurisdiction police department. And functionally, it's there to identify impending threats and gather as much information as possible to identify and assess the likelihood of a future scenario, rather than being based on necessarily a current crime series or pattern necessarily, but based on cues that you're finding in data or suspicious activity reports. So, you're showing these suspicious activities that are leading you to believe a potential threat is going to occur. So people gathering items to conduct an action or something like that, versus all these crimes that have already been committed as part of a series. So, in practice, both intelligence analysis and crime analysis are in the habit of identifying problems. We're both identifying a problem that's occurring or about to occur, but a lot of times intelligence analysis ends at giving the decision maker, so like your chief, a patrol sergeant, your commander, or whatever your structure is, your decision makers at the top, your analysis and the evidence, and then letting them go from there, versus crime analysis that takes it the next step. So if you write an intelligence brief, you're basically giving them your analysis and evidence saying, we assess with a high likelihood that X scenario is going to occur, and then, you're done. You wash your hands of it. Print, go to lunch, as Sean Bear would say. But I have a hard time just stopping there. That's my one qualm, as you would say, qualm with the intelligence process that kind of has it separated here in the U.S. is that I don't want to stop there. My mind keeps going, like in that tactical operational direction afterwards. That's where crime analysis picks up, I think, after that point, is we take the next step to give them the now what. Like, what should we do about this problem, right? So you've done your intelligence, you have the scenario, we think that X is going to occur, and now the crime analyst hat comes on, and you say, okay, well, here's your tactical bulletin then. We're giving you now details about next daytime location. This is where you should be to prevent the crime or to catch the bad guy. Or you've got your strategic hat on, or you're doing a POP project, problem-oriented policing, project, and, you've got this scenario, these problems are happening now, what are we going to do about it? It's also the analyst's job to tell the department, the decision makers, like, what can we do about this problem? So, you're doing a cost-benefit analysis maybe, or you're comparing what other departments have done to solve these long-term problems, like, did it work for them or not? What could we do here that might work for us? Is it extra patrol? Is it hardening a target? Is it putting up cameras or things like that? So I think that, in essence, The intelligence analysis has always been part of the crime analysis process. It's just maybe not something we're naming that, or that we're realizing that that's what we're doing. Because when you're building all of the information up to put your series together, that's kind of intelligence analysis. That's what you're doing. When you're building your strategic process or your, pop project, and you're researching potential outcomes and weighing, the benefits of things, that's intelligence analysis. That's what you're doing. So I think that oftentimes we are already doing it as crime analysts and don't really realize it. We should definitely be incorporating both to be a well-rounded analyst.
Then you actually have certifications in 3 different spots, as I mentioned in the beginning. So you've gotten your certification with IACA and IALEA and the Department of Justice in California, which is a crime and intelligence certification as well. Mm-hmm. So I guess, what was your motivation to get all those certifications?
Well, I don't know, just kind of like personal gratification, just to show that I could do it. Especially when I got my IACA certification while I was working at Robbinsdale. And it was just kind of, I did that at the time just kind of to prove myself that I still had all of my skills since I wasn't applying it every day, that I wanted to be especially marketable when I was going to leave, that I had this certification. And then, when I started to do a little bit more intelligence analysis again after I came to Eagan, helping officers with cases and trying to track people down and things like that. And, we do a lot of that with the credit card fraud, trying to dig up as much as we can on these people. I decided, it might be a good idea for me to go through the IALEA certification as well, just to see how different it is, what that requires, and if I kind of have my chops, as it were, in both aspects of analysis. And, the programs are similar in the qualifications, so it was just a matter of kind of focusing on a little bit different content in order to pass the exam. But it just, for me, I think it kind of helps me in the back of my mind if something pops up where I'm like, what am I going to do with this? And it's just like, you've gone through this, you've done the training, you've taken the test, you can figure this out. It's more so, I did it more so for me than for anything else, but I figured, why not? It can't hurt to have it all, right?
Yeah, no, as I said, you've removed all doubt.
Yeah.
So with IACA certification, it's, I think, 100 question test.
Yeah.
And
200, I think.
Is it 200?
It's 200. It's 10 per section. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And there's 20 sections. Yes, you're right. And then for IALEA's, it's a mixture of multiple choice and a written exam, correct?
Correct. It's multiple choice, short answer, and 3 essay questions. It takes longer for them to grade as well. You're sitting in limbo like, oh, did I pass?
Yeah. And then what was California's process?
Well, that I was when they were still in conjunction with the Alpha Group, all those same trainings. And so it was finishing the final projects and sending all of your letters saying you completed these tasks to the Department of Justice to get your certificate. That was the easier one, I hate to say. But
all right. Well, that was my next question. Which one was the hardest?
I think I was most worried about passing the IACA one. It feels a little daunting when you're going through it with the rules how they are now, where you have to pass every section, and if you get one section that's wrong, then you fail. I was really worried about that. But I think the harder one to actually take was probably the IALEA because of the essay questions. It's like I hadn't written an essay since grad school. I'm like, what am I supposed to write in this essay?
Yeah. Now, do you have any idea what the essay questions are going to be?
No. They gave you the outline of the readings that they wanted you to go through, which were many that they could reference in the test. And they gave you options as to which questions you could pick. So there was like a couple superfluous ones. So if you decided, I really don't want to answer that question, then you answer all the others. But you didn't really get any heads up beforehand, no.
Man, I can imagine testing that, or grading that rather, right? I think one of the advantages to the IACA test is that it is multiple choice. There is usually one answer.
Yeah.
So usually there's supposed to be one answer, right? And then when you get into grading open-ended questions or even 3 essays, that's a whole different ballgame there.
Yeah, I believe they have a panel of people that review them and they take the average grade, if I remember correctly. That was the most nerve-wracking one.
Was there a presentation part to that as well?
No,
Okay.
no.
For some reason, I thought
Unless they changed it, it could be. I don't. It's been a few years.
Okay. No, I don't think, probably not. I used to do some teaching for IACA, their FIAP program 10, 12 years ago. I guess it's probably more like 12 or 15 now, but I do remember talking about it. For some reason, I thought there was a presentation portion as well. So I guess what would you change about the certifications?
I would like to see, and are you on the certification updating committee as well? I can't remember.
The steering committee? No,
No.
I was. I stepped.
I thought I remembered
stepped
seeing your
aside.
name.
Yeah, I stepped
Well-
aside to do this podcast. Lame excuse, right?
Nah, that's a good excuse. Well, I've been helping on that subcommittee or whatever you want to call it as well for the new certification and then updating the current certification. And I think I probably want to change the scoring structure, maybe add a practical exam at some point. I know nobody likes that. And then there you have the whole, how do we grade it and how do you work on it? But it's not just, especially if you're doing the CALIA level, which would be the highest level certification, then you should also be able not just answer these questions, but you should also be able to show that you can do these things as well. Because it is difficult for a lot of people to take these tests, but it's like a lot of people can also memorize the stuff in a book and then be able to answer the question and then forget it tomorrow. And, it would be nice if you could just be like, okay, I need you to put together, here's your data, build me, your tactical bulletin with your predictions in it. And that's your final part of the exam. A lot of people probably hate me for saying that, but I think that would be a good show, where you could maybe book up some extra points in case you did poorly in one little section or something, that you'd have these extra practical to show that I really do know what I'm doing. I just am a poor test taker or something like that. So
yeah, maybe. I would shoe that in hand at the conference.
Mhm.
So you just present at the conference as a normal session and have that be part of your exam.
Well, I could see that.
So then it's not so much a closed room, it's everything. You're presenting your findings.
You're giving
to
your
the
briefing.
whole. Yes.
We had
I
to do
see.
that in our Homeland Security class I just took like a month ago. We had to do a bunch of briefings to pass that class.
You had mentioned advanced ones. Just for the listeners, the idea for the new certification is to have an entry-level basic certification and then to have the CALIA, the advanced one as well. So the one certification you could have the basic education, and then the advanced one, you have to have so many years of experience and so many publications and products under your belt. I guess one thing that I'd like to see is have the certification be part of more job announcements. So as an association, we enter a memorandum of understanding with departments that said, hey, when you have a new analyst position, let's have on there, you prefer to have that certification, because it gives it more credence then.
I've seen it on a few. They actually, when the St. Paul Police Department here in Minnesota was starting to hire analysts a few years ago, that was one of their actually required qualification, and then they moved it to preferred because they didn't get enough people applying that had it. Because I was like, you realize your pool is limited right now if you say, I only want CALIAs. I'm like, that's great, but I don't know how many people are going to want to move to St. Paul.
Yeah, no, because I think do you know how many there are right now certified? I think, is it like 70 or 80?
Yeah, I was about to say probably in the 70s.
And then on the IACA side, I think it's over 600.
I'm not sure. I didn't even ask.
I think it's on
their surprise me though.
It's on their website somewhere. I just saw it last week, I want to say, but that was 2018 numbers. Who knows? I don't know how many they get in a year, but I want to say it was over 600, which I was surprised by, but that's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot, but good for them.
Yeah. So would there be anything that you would change on IACA's certification?
No, I'd maybe have a better study guide rather than just here, read all these books. I think IACA does a good job about that, about what points they're actually covering. But that would have been a little bit nicer, because then you're kind of stressed out about, I have to write an essay and I have a time limit.
Oh, what was the time limit?
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I think it was 3 hours.
Okay. To complete the whole thing from beginning to end?
Mm-hmm, I think so. Then you had to bring your own laptop, and then you're submitting these Word documents, because I'm like, what format do you want it in? And they're just like, it just needs to be a Word document. Email it to your instructor. I'm like, what? Okay.
Now, for IACAs, did you take the fundamentals class to prepare, or how
I
did you
did
prepare?
not. If I remember correctly, I don't think we even had the essential skills classes up and running yet when I took it. I was certified back in 2012, so I'm pretty sure we didn't even have online classes yet. I just read the book. Like before I took the test, the only IACA class I had gone to was that tactical analysis one. And like I said, I had gone through the Alpha Group courses already. So those cover some of the stuff that our fundamentals curriculum would have covered. I studied that book like night and day. I read it cover to cover multiple times. And I even like the night before I was taking the test, I had it proctored at like one of those learning centers because my HR department wouldn't do it. I had my friend quiz me. I gave her a list of things and like, just pick a question out of this book and quiz me because I just wanted to make sure I had everything down before I went and took it.
Yeah, same here. I just read the book. I say just read the book, but I was like you. I think I had so many markings in the book and sticky notes and that book looked ragged by the time I was done with it.
Yeah, mine's seen better days, but that's a good book.
So, but now you have updated the Foundations of Crime Analysis training, right?
Yeah, I updated the Foundations of Crime Analysis material a few years ago, and we've only offered it a few times since then because it is an in-person class, and now we have Gwen Udell is teaching, is it fundamentals or foundations? I get the two words mixed up, and one class is called one and one class is called the other, but she has her own online version now that covers a lot of similar curriculum, so unless somebody requests ours specifically, we just run hers quarterly that people can take online.
What did you update in the curriculum when you did it?
Well, I added some new sections with more up-to-date case studies and more up-to-date like bulletin examples and things like that, more up-to-date. There's a section about, making maps and things like that. And I updated the materials in there to be more current. And I'm trying to remember because it was however many years ago that I updated that curriculum. Part of it is also the base for the smaller jurisdictions class, which, I hope, Kyle Stoker doesn't yell at me, but I am redeveloping the smaller jurisdictions course to be a 12-week online class. And some of that curriculum that I updated before is being updated again and added into this new 12-week online curriculum that we hope to offer in January. So
I happen to have Kyle on next week. So
oh, nice.
I didn't do that on purpose, honestly. Did you say the class had to be taught in a classroom?
Well, we have the two separate, basically the two separate types of curriculum. We have the 12-week online classes, and then we have the 5-day in-person classes. Okay. And so that class was designed and is formatted to be a 5-day in-person course. Especially right now, we don't get a lot of requests for the in-person classes, and we've been trying to migrate the ones that will work into an online format, which we've done for computer applications, tactical analysis, and now the Microsoft Access for Analysis courses are working well online. I don't think we're going to merge this one, only because we already have that 12-week online class that's similar that Gwen teaches. So.
All right, well, let's take another quick break. When we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit more about your current role. I want to get into computer forensics examination, and I want to get into some scams. You're listening to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Kyle Stoker, and I'm encouraging you to vote in the IACA elections. So it's a little bit of a confusing process, but between August and September, nominees need to get nominated. So there's a nomination process where they have to get 2% of the membership, and then voting actually starts on October 1st. So for the entire month of October, you have the opportunity to vote for your final candidate. So make sure you go to the IACA website and vote, because our membership has a voice in who leads the organization, and you want to make sure that your voice is heard. Thank you very much.
Hey there, everybody. This is Albert Mesa, and I'm here to ask you a very important question. Have you ever done a sit-along with the dispatcher? If the answer is no, and you're currently an analyst, you're missing out on a huge piece of the data puzzle. Not only will you open your eyes to how data is captured, entered, and coded, you'll see how calls are prioritized and dispatched and get a true feel for CAD data. You'll get to see it in a whole new light and use it as a tool in your analysis. And who doesn't want to sit with the true first responder who probably saved a life right before they sat with you?
Welcome back. Before the break, Angela was telling us all the certifications that she has. And I want to get into now your current role with the Eagan Police Department. I want to talk first a little bit about computer forensics examination. Kind of talk a little bit about what you do and the tasks that you get into.
Well, when Eagan created this position, the reason they got approval in the budget to have it again, because they had an analyst and then it was taken away in the budget back in the financial crisis back in 2009, like everybody else. When they finally got the approval to have it again, they're like, well, we don't know that we need just an analyst. We also need a computer forensics person. And the city council was like, okay, if you do that, then we'll give you your money. So I was like, well, I think it'll be easier for you to teach an analyst how to do computer forensics than it would be to teach a computer forensics person how to do analysis. So I decided, hey, I'll put in for it. You know, it was kind of, it was definitely a learning curve. I mean, there are a lot of skills that are transferable from analysis to computer forensics because it's a lot of intricacies and a lot of data mining. I mean, like basically at the end of the day, what you're doing after you've done your acquisition from the computer or the cell phone, what you're doing is data mining. You're trying to find those snippets of information and that evidence inside mounds and mounds and mounds of data. It's just using a different software to do it. You know, I figured I'm really good at data mining. I've been doing the Intel stuff for a really long time. I can dig in a cell phone. I can dig in a computer. You know, when I started, they sent me to a ton of training on different softwares because mostly what you're training is in how to use the software versus how forensics works itself. They're just like, here, learn how to use this software and the rest will come to you. I learned how to use Encase, which is one of the standard softwares that people have, Celebrate, and now Axiom, Magnet Axiom are the ones that we have. And I get assigned a caseload, basically. I'm somewhat a civilian detective in that regard where I have cases assigned to me to do the forensics. I pull a case number if I need it. My partner writes a warrant if we, because I can't do that part of it. Mm-hmm. He swears to it. We execute it. I seize all the evidence and I come back here and I process it. And sometimes it takes months, depending on how big the device's memories are. And the fact that technically it's only part of my job. I still have to do analysis while I'm doing all of this. So usually my caseload takes me a longer time to get through than my partner who's full-time down in the forensics lab. So I've had cases that have run, 6 months or more because I'm not in there every day, digging through it every day because I still have other responsibilities.
So can you just give us an example from beginning to end of a case that you worked on to help explain exactly what you do and what the solution was?
Sure. So probably, I want to say it was like maybe a year or so after I started, I got called in on a weekend for a case. We had a party drop a cell phone off in the lobby that belonged to, I want to say it was his brother-in-law or something like that he had seen some unsavory photos on and wanted us to review it. So they called me in and took custody of the phone and did the digital forensics on it. So I acquired a copy of the phone. Basically, when you're doing your forensic acquisition, the goal is to make a byte-for-byte copy of that full memory so that you have an evidence copy to work off of. And then the phone itself still remains intact as evidence. So we made the digital copy. We made our acquisition. I say we like it's more than one person. It was me. I did it. And so I load the file and I'm looking through it and I see the photos that this person's talking about. And I mean, I'm not going to get into super big detail, but I'll just say it involved children. So okay. We'll just not go any further than that. We get cases like that all the time from IACA. But in this one...
What's IACA for those that don't know?
I'm sorry. Internet Crimes Against Children.
Okay.
We are an IACA affiliate, so we do get those cases sent to us. So I'm looking through the files and I'm seeing these photos. And the thing we're more worried about at this point is this a current victim or are these downloaded? So I'm looking through and the reporting party who dropped it off gave us a name of the person whose phone this was. So there's clearly tattoos on this person's hand in this photo. And so, I'm digging through and I look him up and I'm finding booking photos that I can compare to him and like Facebook things that I can compare photos that I know are him to see if he also has 2 tattoos on his hand. And he does. So then, I'm confirming that with my detective. I give him the information and then we dig back through the phone if we can figure out who these people are so that we can intervene. And so, as it turns out, he's actually a drug dealer, and they were looking at him more for the narcotics side of things. And we've seen tons of evidence of that. But then also a few of the people that he was dealing to were then in form of payment, allowing him access to children, is awful. But, that's how you kind of get through it. At least from my perspective, and I know from my partner's perspective, is that like somebody has to work these cases. And if I have to be the one that looks at this to get this guy behind bars and protect these children, then I'm going to be the one to do it. We were able to gather that all together. We identified a bunch of the people and, pulled out his text messages and put together a timeline of who he's talking to and comparing their family members and like photos of what the apartment looks like. And if we can compare when we go up to that apartment to see if that's the same place that these were taking, that these photos were coming from. And we're able to put together a pretty good timeline and evidence with that. And along with a few other departments, they did arrest him and roll it up into a federal prosecution. And he was convicted for quite a long time, if I recall. And the case kind of just blew wide open after we got that cell phone and all that evidence off that cell phone. So
were any of the pictures encrypted?
No, it was a flip phone, actually, which makes me so happy because at this point, it's really, if we don't have a passcode, odds of us getting into a cell phone are really slim, especially if it's an iPhone, unless, we have Grey Key, which we don't. So our options are limited, but we do our best to get into those phones anyway, and we'll try everything we can think of. But everybody has a cell phone, so you do the best you can, and that's usually what we're getting in as evidence is cell phones and cell phones and cell phones. And I always think of it kind of like, it's just, for an analyst, it's the next logical step of information that you'd get, because we're already processing, like call detail records and cell tower information. And then if you have the cell phone, the next step is you get all that data now that's on their actual cell phone, and then you can put all of these things together. It's just like one more piece to the puzzle that the analyst can include to make the bigger picture.
I mean, I can't imagine. My iPhone, I think, has like 128 gigs of information. I mean,
it takes a really long time.
So I can't imagine go through some of those things when you think about websites and apps and
and
pictures.
Some of the apps, you have to build out your own parsing for some of the apps too. That the Celebrate does a really good job in automatically parsing a lot of the apps that are standard on most people's phones. But you get into like Snapchat and Text Now and things like that, where you have to know the database structure in order to find what you're looking for. Knowing databases is a great thing all around. Oh, sorry, that was my phone ringing.
You got some background music.
Yeah, I just turned it off.
That's okay. So then, do you have to testify for entrance examination?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
A lot of times, especially in, like I said, IACA cases, they don't want it to go to court. The guy will just plead out. I mean, I anticipate that at some point I will have to testify to that, but I have not yet had to do so.
Now, is there a criteria for you guys that it has to meet a certain threshold before you'll take it on?
No.
Okay.
It just has to have a tie to our jurisdiction. So Eagan is one of those cities where we're very customer service oriented for our community. So if it has any sort of tie to Eagan, especially if another jurisdiction says that that's not our case, it's Eagan's case, we'll always take it.
All right. Well, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is scams. Those are happening, taking up a lot of your time. So let's just talk about some of the scam investigations that you've been currently working on.
Yeah, we unfortunately get a lot of scams, a lot of like social engineering scams, a lot of I'm sure people are well aware of like the IRS scams. And then there's my grandparent, I'm locked up in Mexico scams and things like that. But especially in the last year or so, we've seen a lot more of the employee boss scams, which I'll explain, and then like the romance scams. The romance scams would be, a person goes on to a dating website, meets a person, and, they're giving them information about themselves. They think they're starting a relationship. And that person is clearly not who they're saying that they are, but they're really convincing, of course. And they convince these people to send them money. And, in some cases, a lot of money, like, okay, we're going to buy a house together, send me the money for the deposit. We're going,
Wow.
It's like, I need this money to pay this off. I think one of them was the person was in another country and they needed to be able to pay off certain things to get their investments out for them to move to the US to be with them. So they needed them to send them X amount of money and then they'd send it back. And then, of course, they never do because that's, completely false. We also get the scams this year, especially we've seen a number more of them where you're getting an email from someone you think is, your accountant or someone you think is your boss asking you to purchase gift cards for a client or change the account information on an existing client to forward funds to them. And, we've had businesses who are out, tens of thousands of dollars because they received a spoofed email they thought was their boss asking them to purchase these items, and they give them like the iTunes gift card numbers over the phone, and it's clearly not their boss, and they take the money and run, and you can't get it back. So they're out all this money, and it's unfortunate because we've had a few success stories where they've called us in time where we could stop the bank transfer, but it's only happened once. So usually, unfortunately, when it's gone, it's gone. And we've had, I think last year we had well over $200,000 worth of it, almost, I think over $300,000 actually. And this year, just in one case alone, we had 140. So we'll definitely be higher in our scam losses this year than we were last year.
With the romantic scams, do they meet? Or is this situations where they've never met face to face?
Yeah, it's typically situations where they've never met face to face, where they've sent photos and they've, maybe talked on the phone, or, they do a lot of texting and things like that in email, but they've not met in person. Because it's usually like, for us to be together, I need to do this, which means I need you to help me because I don't have enough money, is typically kind of how the conversation carries out. And unfortunately, they send them the money.
That's wild. Not meeting somebody and then sending them large sums of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think that when I see those emails or see those warnings, I'm like, well, it must work or they wouldn't do it. If it never worked, they wouldn't be doing this stuff. So, every once in a while, it's got to work. It's going to work.
Unfortunately. And our detectives do the best that they can. I know they try to track down bank records and where are these going, and they're the iTunes gift card codes. And once they transfer them out of there, it's hard to track. And, we're working a case right now where we're trying to get the records of the bank accounts that all the transactions were sent to, which were all different bank accounts, and then seeing if we can follow the money trail from there. But odds are pretty good they would probably put them in a Bitcoin kiosk and we'll never see it again, unfortunately.
So is the increase for this year, do you think that's due to COVID and a lot of people at home, a lot of more working on the computer?
I would say so. I did an Intel briefing on that a few months ago where I'm like, I'm pretty sure these scams are going to increase this year, especially since a lot more people are conducting more of their business remotely and not face-to-face. So it's either email or a phone call. And those are really, unfortunately, very easy things to spoof for people who aren't paying close enough attention. And if you're constantly getting emails from, a supervisor saying, pay this bill, pay this bill, pay this bill, are you going to, catch the one that's fraudulent that seems to be legit, So it's a hard thing to stop.
Basically, all the efforts has got to be on prevention, just educating the public and whatnot, because there's really not a lot of recourse.
Yeah. That's one of the things, I had a list put together for our crime prevention person and our public information officers to put out when they're, because our PIO is really great about getting some of these stories out into the media locally anyway, for trying to do scam prevention and things like that, or, lock your car and that kind of stuff. But I tried to put in periodically, even in our officer briefings, that I'll send out tips for scam prevention, like either if they take a call, they can help them further, or so that they don't fall victim to it, or just kind of like a constant reminder for, double check the email. If it's something that seems out of place, call the person. Don't just take it at face value and things like that.
All right. Well, let's, this last segment, I just want to get into some of your personal interests, and because you and your husband are restoring a 1880 farmhouse. Is that correct?
Yes, we are.
Oh boy. So just talk about a little bit about that, how you found the house and where you want to go for it. Because you do most of the work yourself, right? You're a do-it-yourselfer. Nice.
Yeah, as much as we can. Like
it's part of it's to save money and part of it's because it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
We do like to do it. And I think, my husband and I together make a fairly good handyman. So we can handle a lot of things that come our way. But no, we were looking for a bigger house a few years ago. And I love old houses. I love the character. I love the layout, especially like, the Queen Anne and Victorian type things. And we were looking for houses and we came across this one. It's in a river town to the west of the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. And, at first I didn't want to go look at it because the pictures online weren't very flattering. And my husband's like, no, let's just go look at it. Let's just go look at it. And, we walk in the side door, which is the back of the house are two additions that they put on, one in the 50s and one in probably the late 70s, early 80s. And so there's like no charm whatsoever. It's just like every other house. And I walk in and I'm like, no, this isn't going to work for me. And we walk through to the front porch and my realtor's like, close your eyes, turn around and come back in. And so I come back in the house through the front porch, and then there you have, the staircase, the hardwood floors, the taller ceilings, the big archway. And I'm like, okay, I can work with this. So, luckily enough, we did end up buying it. And we've been there for 3 years now. And I mean, my whole goal with it, besides making it our own and kind of fixing the errors the previous thought he was handyman made. Because every time we open a wall, we're like, oh gosh, what is this? But it's to kind of bring back all the character to it, because a lot of the character had been taken out. The old part of the house it's like the beautiful pine floors and, the tall staircase and the wide open doorways into what we put we call it the study, because that's where all of our books are. And it's like, this is what I want the whole house to feel like. And so we've been slowly taking out the carpet and putting back hardwood floors in the areas where there was, where they took everything out, and trying to bring back salvaged wood to put back, doors, and put trim back where they had put in, like kind of the blonde 80s wood trim, and like take that out and put in, the old darker trim with the finials, and just slowly making our way through the rooms of the house to try to bring back that character to it. So far, we've tackled the family room, which they had as a family room. It was funny. When you walked into the house, what was initially the parlor when the house was built, they turned into their dining room. And then you walk through the kitchen, which was an addition, because the kitchen used to be like a summer kitchen shack off the back. So obviously they took that out. You walk through the kitchen and then you go into this giant family room that was part of the addition. And I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. So we turned that family room into a dining room. We put in hardwood floors and put up wainscoting and just kind of make it feel like it should have been part of the house, because it didn't look like it. Our next project is the downstairs bathroom, which obviously wasn't originally a bathroom because there wasn't a bathroom. So we're going to turn the downstairs bathroom, kind of try to make it look like it would be somewhat period appropriate if there had been a bathroom on the house. Yeah, but it's slow moving process, but we enjoy it.
So what are some either misconceptions or things that are overlooked when remodeling such an old house, or maybe something that HGTV doesn't show you?
Well, you never know what you're going to get when you open a wall. We found really old wiring. So like some of the places where we're trying to replace outlets, we can't because the wiring's too thick to fit on a modern outlet. So we have to go find different outlets to work with our wiring. Our laundry room we have to walk through the bathroom downstairs to get into our laundry room, because they built off part of that room to turn into a laundry room in the bathroom. It's strange. But you don't think about how every door in the house is a different width now. So we literally had to take the door and the door frame off and like cut just a little bit of the wall back to fit the new washer and dryer through the door. Like things you just don't think about how narrow it was. Because like we took the old ones out just fine. Why wouldn't the new ones fit? Okay, well, because they're bigger, and now you have to handle this doorway. And like we're taking it down and it's not even secured. Like we could have just literally lifted it out and we wouldn't have done anything. I'm like, how is this door even hanging on? And then one side of the wall, the owners had said that they took all the lath and plaster out and put drywall up. Well, that's not actually true, because you look in the wall and there's actually 6 layers of wall in there. And the lath and plaster is still there in with the old kind of horse hair
canvas lining inside and everything, and then the drywall's over it, so that wall is like a good foot thick, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll have to deal with that at some point.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's just, you never know what you're going to get into in a project, but it's the kitchen was challenging too. It's not a full basement under parts of the house, and it was just a crawl space. And when we wanted to put in a gas stove, running a line through that crawl space for the gas was quite difficult. But, we got it done, and it works. But it was like, okay, let's never do this again.
Well, hopefully this is it. This is your home eventually, right?
Yeah, this is supposed to be our forever house. So that's why we're kind of taking our time and enjoying what we do and kind of planning deliberately, not just let's just make it pretty and have it be done, but no, kind of making our decisions mindfully in that regard.
Well, let's get to our last segment. The last segment is Words to the World. This is where you can promote any idea that you want to. So, Angela, what are your words to the world?
Most of the time, my soapbox has been that you don't need fancy software to perform analysis. And I always try to reiterate that every time I give a training or speak to people about analysis, is that you don't need fancy software programs to do your job. I have heard from departments in the past say that they weren't going to let their new analysts start until they had their software up and running. And in my head, I'm like, no, you're putting the cart before the horse. You need your person there. You don't, before you have a software, the software doesn't run your program. The person is running your analysis. And so I always try to remind people that you can do your analysis. You can conduct everything you need to do without the fancy software, and you should be able to do so that you can explain what's happening. And even if you do have the software, so that you can verify your results when they come out, so you know that they're right. Yet at almost every department that I've worked at since the task force, I've only had Microsoft Office to do most of my tasks in, and it comes out just fine. And it sometimes, yes, may take a little longer, but you still get perfect results with normal everyday programs. And so while that fancy software is a wonderful tool, and if your department wants to buy it for you, that's fantastic. You don't need it. It's just a tool, and it's never going to be a replacement for you and your analytical mind.
Very good. Well, I tell my guests you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later. But I do appreciate, Angela, you talking with me today, and thank you for being on the show, and you be safe.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on Analyst Talk with Jason Alder. We hope you not only enjoyed the show, but also learned something new. For more information on our guests and information relating to today's topic, please visit our website at leapodcast.com. Special thanks to the Rough and Tumble for our theme song. For more of their music, you can visit their website at theroughandtumble.com. Also thanks to Kyle McMullen for our show logo. For more of his design, please visit his website at moderntype.com. The show is hosted, recorded, and edited by Jason Elder and written by me, Mindy. You can contact us both via the LEA Podcast website. Please join us again next time as we interview another expert in this great field.